Welcome back to the eNETEmployer how-to video series. This lesson will discuss how to perform the year-end process with the program. We'll begin by explaining the steps needed to process the first payroll of the new year and how to clear each employee's year-to-date values. We'll then discuss the process of creating, reviewing, and editing employee T4s. Then we'll round out the lesson by creating an XML file for use with the CRA's Internet Filing Transfer Service. If you follow the steps shown in this video, your year-end will run smoothly and efficiently. Let's begin the lesson by processing our first payroll of the new year. The first thing we need to do is log into the program and choose the payroll service. When the program appears, ensure that you're on the Payroll tab and then navigate to the Calculation screen by using the Payroll Processing Calculations menu command. As you can see, our demo payroll for 2016 had 26 pay periods, with the final period ending on December 19th and a pay date of December 24th. The next pay period shown here runs from December 20th to January 2nd, 2016, with a pay date of January 8th. This means that this pay cycle will cross over into the year 2016. Notice how the current pay period status is set to new because it has not yet been calculated. Now, although the pay period start and end dates are vital for our pay calculations, the pay date is actually the most important date from a year-end perspective. Since the next pay date will occur in the following calendar year, on January 8th, 2016, this pay period is considered the first pay of 2016, and thus we will need to clear the year-to-date balances from the previous year when we close this pay cycle. Before we perform the year-end process, let's take a moment to review our current payroll. To perform a quick review of our employee hours, we'll open the Speedy Update screen by choosing the Payroll Processing Speedy Update command. As shown here, we have 3 hourly employees, each of whom have worked 80 hours for the period, and 2 salary employees whose salary amounts are carried over automatically each pay period. So now that we've confirmed our employee work hours, let's calculate the payroll. To do so, we'll choose the Payroll Processing Calculations command once again, and when the calculation screen appears, we'll double-click on the current pay period to edit the row. If we scroll over to the right, we'll see the Clear Year-to-Date Balance cell. Since this is the first pay of the year, we will need to place a check in the Clear Year-to-Date Balance box. By doing so, we're specifying that employee year-to-date balances should be cleared when this first pay of 2016 is calculated. Note that if we ever forget to place a check in this box for the initial payroll of a new year, we will encounter an error message if we attempt to calculate the payroll. The error message will appear in the notification bar above the table, reminding us that we need to clear the year-to-date balances. This year-to-date clearing prompt is included as a safeguard in order to ensure that payroll administrators explicitly clear employee year-end balances, as they should, before a payroll is calculated in a subsequent year. Note that this checkbox is only to be used when you run the first pay of a new year. If you attempt to check the box for any other pay run, the calculation will fail. With the checkbox activated, we can now save the row, and the Clear Year-to-Date Balance cell is now set to yes. A note also appears above the table indicating that setting the Clear Year-to-Date Balance will zero any year-to-date values when the pay is calculated. Now let's calculate the pay by choosing the Calculate button. And once the calculations are complete, a message will appear in the notification bar stating that the pay has been calculated successfully. Please check the report and save a backup before closing the pay. Notice that the status column now indicates that the payroll has indeed been calculated. And as is the case before closing any payroll, we must first create a backup file, so let's do that. Now that our backup file is complete, let's follow the program's suggestion and view a report to verify our payroll numbers. If we look to the columns on the right, we can see the Generate Report button. And if we choose the button, an interim Payroll Register report is generated and we can now review our payroll data. Depending on your browser settings, the resulting PDF file will either be stored in your Downloads folder, or you may be presented with a dialog box that will prompt you where to save the file. For our demo, we're using the Google Chrome browser, so I can click directly on the PDF button that's appeared at the bottom of the browser, and the report will appear on the screen. Let's zoom in slightly on the Payroll Register report to get a better view. Notice how the word interim appears as a watermark in the background. This watermark will be removed once the payroll is closed. As we scroll through the pay register, we can see that each employee has been paid accordingly, both salary and hourly types. And once we reach the end of the employee list, we see the overall total shown here: 5 active employees and 5 paid employees. And as we scroll down further to the last page in the report, we can see the different business accounts that are being used: full rate and reduced rate. So now let's close the report and return to our payroll. So with our payroll now verified and backed up, we can choose the close button, and this will finalize the pay. Once complete, the program again displays a note stating that the close function was successful and that we can now insert a new pay sequence when we are ready to begin our next payroll. Now that we've completed the year-end procedure, let's take a quick look at the year-to-date balances for our employees. When the payroll was closed, all of the year-to-date values for 2015 were reset to 0. To see this in action, let's review the employee's year-to-date values by choosing the Employee YeartoDate Earnings menu command. When the screen appears, we will choose the expand icon beside the first employee in the list, Gregory House. Notice how most of the values for his various sub-rows show 0 to reflect the brand new payroll year. The only sub-row that displays any values is for his regular earnings. These values represent the amounts that he has just received for the first pay of this year, and this sub-row will continue to increment accordingly as each new payroll is processed. Let's repeat the process and review the year-to-date values for his deduction and benefit items. We'll choose the Employee menu once again, and then year-to-date deductions and benefits. And when the screen appears, we will again choose the expand icon beside our employee, Gregory. Just like the previous year-to-date screen, the values shown for his various sub-rows are relatively low and represent the amounts for the first pay of this year only. Each of these sub-rows will continue to increment accordingly as each new payroll is processed. Unlike the two year-to-date earnings and deduction benefit menu options, the year-to-date accumulator screen will not show 0 values after the first pay of the new year, because accumulators act as an ongoing account where the values will build up over time until they are dispersed, or if the carry forward year-end balance checkbox is activated for an associated deduction. Once the year-to-date values are cleared, you may wish to perform other common year-end tasks. For example, creating a workers' compensation report. This can only be done once the year-to-dates have been cleared, because the report uses the values from the previous year. To create the WCB report, choose the Payroll Processing Reports command. When the screen appears, choose the Workers' Compensation option beside the New button, and then select the New button to insert a new report row into the table. By default, this report uses the data from the current payroll year, as indicated by the 2016 showing in the year cell. To view the previous year's data, move to the column entitled Last and remove the check from the cell. This action enables a number of other cells so that you can choose different payroll years and pay sequences. Move to the year cell and make it 2015, and then move to the payroll cell and choose the first pay sequence in the list. The pay sequence that appears in the end cell is already set to the final sequence of 2015, so we're ready to create the report. Choose the Save icon. That stores the report settings, and then choose the Generate Report button. As with the previous report, depending on your browser settings, the resulting PDF will either be stored in your Downloads folder, or you may be presented with a dialog box that prompts you where to save the file. For our demo, I can click directly on the PDF that has appeared at the bottom of my browser. When the file opens, we can review the WCB data for each of the employees. This includes related data such as their social insurance numbers, assessable earnings, WCB rates, and amounts. As part of your year-end, you may also wish to create an employee profile report for record-keeping purposes. Many companies choose to create this report to store in each employee's file at the end of each year. You can create this report easily right here in the report screen by inserting a new report row using the Employee Profile option. When the report row appears, you can set the year to 2015 as previous, and then choose Generate Report. The last two sections in our lesson today will discuss how to generate both your employee T4s and the XML file that will contain the T4 data, if you plan to use the CRA's Internet Filing Service. To do so, we must first define the settings that the program will need in order to generate these year-end files. We'll do so by choosing the Year-End Settings command. This opens the Year-End Settings screen where you can enter and modify the required settings. Select the New button to insert a year-end settings row into the table. The cells in this row will contain the required year-end data settings that will be used when both the employee T4s and XML files are generated. When the row appears, you can review the various cells and enter the data as it relates to your company. Some of the cells are mandatory, such as a transmitter name and address, while other cells may only be required based on your company's current situation, such as the proprietor's SIN and registered pension plan numbers. Once you've completed the settings, save the row to complete the year-end settings. We are now ready to create our employee T4s. Although you can create T4s manually for any employee at any time, eNETEmployer allows you to generate the entire batch of employee T4s in one step. This procedure is typically carried out in the first few weeks of the new year, leading up to the February T4 deadline. It's suggested that if any manual T4 adjustments are required, payroll administrators should do so prior to printing the T4s. This allows payroll admins to add special items that may not have been accounted for during the year. For example, auto allowances for executives that are not set up in the payroll, special bonuses that have been paid, and so on. So let's proceed and create our employee T4s for 2015. Let's begin by choosing the Year-End Edit T4s command. This opens the Edit T4 screen where you can view and edit each employee's T4 data. It's also used to view Releve 1 data if you pay employees who work in Quebec. Move to the drop-down list beside the Generate T4s button and ensure that the year reads 2015, and then choose the Generate T4s button. This action generates a T4 row for all of the employees in the current payroll based on the data for the year that you selected in the drop-down list. Once the process is complete, notice that a message appears in the notification bar showing the number of T4s that have been created. Note that other messages may also appear in this location, indicating steps you may have to take if the Generate T4s procedure was not completed successfully. As we look over the various columns, we can see that many of the cells have information inserted automatically based on the calculations that were performed by the program. You now have the option of reviewing the T4 data either one employee at a time or as a group. Let's first review the T4 data for a single employee. We'll click on the row for Gregory House, and then we'll scroll to the right to review his T4 data for 2015. Notice how the program has inserted the necessary values for the year, including Box 14, Employment Income, Box 22, Income Tax Deducted, Box 24, EI Insurable Earnings, and so on. If circumstances exist where you need to manually adjust an amount for the T4, you would do so by editing the row as needed, just double-clicking. There are a number of reasons you may need to use this screen to manually adjust the box amount at year's end. For example, if an employee's address information changes during the year, or if an employee turns age 18 or age 70 partway through the year, or perhaps the employee received a taxable benefit and the amount was not reflected in the payroll, In this case, you would manually add the amount to box 40 so that the T4 would accurately reflect the amount. If you wish to review the T4 in a more familiar format, choose the T4 button. This produces a PDF version of the T4 that you can view right on the screen. Now that we've reviewed the data for a single employee, let's use the T4 review report that will allow us to review the data for all employees at once. Choose the Year End, Print Year End Forms command. This opens the Print Year End Forms screen where you can create printed copies of your employee T4 and T4A forms. Select the New button to insert a report row into the table, then click on the Type cell and choose the T4 Review option. Then move to the Name cell and enter something descriptive, perhaps 2015 T4 data, for future reference. Once these settings are complete, we can save the row and then choose the Generate Report button. When we open the PDF report, we can then review the T4 data for each of our employees. The T4 review report contains a summary of all T4s that have been generated for the specified year, and it will list each employee and their corresponding amounts for each T4 box. If one or more T4s encounter an issue while processing, a warning message will also be included. The report also includes the final totals and the T4 box numbers that can be used to fill out a T4 summary. This report is useful for reconciling the yearly totals against the source deduction payments that you remitted to the CRA. Once we've reviewed the T4s and are satisfied with the data, we can print the forms for our employees. Select the New button once again to insert another report row into the table, and then ensure that the T4 option is selected in the Type cell. As with the previous report, we can move through each of the various cells to define the report settings as needed. In our example, we'll enter Employee Copy Only as the name, and then scroll over to the Employer Copy and remove the checkbox, and Government Copy as well. And lastly, we'll choose the Output cell and choose Print with Form Background. Choosing this option will generate a PDF that includes an image of the T4 form in the background. The CRA accepts these types of printed forms for filing purposes. Once these settings are complete, we can save the row and then choose the Generate Report button. When the forms are generated, we can click directly on the PDF button once again, and when the file opens, we can review each of the T4s for each employee. Note that if you wish to create another series of T4s with different print settings, you can modify the information in the existing row, or better yet, you can simply insert a new report row into the table. Since each report row represents a group of settings that will be used to create an individual report, you can add as many rows as needed in order to store different types of T4 print settings. The final step in our lesson will discuss how to create an XML file if you plan to use the CRA's Internet Filing Transfer Service. To begin, we can either insert another report row into the table, or simply use the current report row that we inserted earlier. Let's use the existing row. Again, we'll ensure that the T4 option is selected in the Type cell, and then we'll move to the Output folder and choose Internet Filing XML. Then we'll move to the Name cell and we'll save the settings and generate the report. Again, depending on your browser settings, the resulting XML file will either be stored in your Downloads folder, or you may be presented with a dialog box that will prompt you where to save the file. In our case, we'll choose the Show in Folder option. And we can see that our XML file has been generated and is ready for submission to the CRA. And that completes the lesson on payroll year-end processing with eNETEmployer. We hope you found it helpful. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more eNETEmployer how-to videos. Thanks for watching.